for many years, from the year 610 for another 10 to 13 years. In those years, he was persecuted because the people of that town, they were pagans. They could not understand how God would resurrect a dead person back to life. And worse than that, they could not understand how this man Muhammad is trying to make one God out of all the gods that they worship. They had 360 idols around the sacred mosque in Mecca, and they wanted to keep them there. But the Islamic message was saying there is only one true God. All these things that people are worshipping are worthless. And eventually these would be gotten rid of. But in the meantime, for the 13 years or so, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is being persecuted in Mecca. So he migrates up north eventually to a place called Medina, somewhere here. And that is where eventually he will meet his, he will finally die and go back to meet his Lord. Now, it's after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, migrates to Medina that he starts to get messages that will speak about his engagement in a military confrontation. For the last 13 years or so, the Muslims were being told to be at peace, to turn away from the ignorant, to avoid them, and just say a word of peace to them, and so on. So there was a disengagement with the enemy, and one might say that's partly because the Muslims had no power. But if we understand the full scenario, we will see that it's not only because the Muslims had no power. Of course, if they had no power, that's taken for granted. They're not going to fight. It will be silly. But that doesn't mean that when they have power, it is their policy to fight. It might be their policy to defend themselves if they are being attacked. And that, to me, is the correct interpretation of what has happened. And we'll see how that interpretation is justified. So the Prophet Muhammad then migrated up to there, and then the battles came to be fought one after another. People came, the non-Muslim forces from Mecca would march their way up some 450 kilometers up to Medina to go and attack the Muslims there. This is why you can find that the battles, that the sites of the major battles are actually around Medina. For example, you have the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr was fought at a place called Badr, hence its name, and Badr is very close to Medina. The Battle of Uhud was fought actually at Uhud, which is almost, on a small map like this, indistinguishable from Medina. And then the Battle of Khandaq, the Battle of the Trench, was fought again at Medina, on the northern side of, on the northern frontier of Medina. So let's go back to my page, and you get the impression, just remember that these are the sites of the battle. The battles are not here, the battles are there. So that already tells you who is attacking whom. It is these folks down here that are marching up hundreds of kilometers to go and attack that city, and the people of that city are just coming out to meet them either here or sometimes closer to the city. In fact, it was getting increasingly closer to the city until the Battle of Khandaq. So if I go back to where I have them face the right, I will just quickly now try to retrace the history of that. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, migrated. He left his hometown Mecca in the south. He went up north to Medina. What was he doing? He was leaving the scene of violence. That's where he and his people were being attacked. So he could not retaliate, obviously, because he had no power. But also, as we will see, because it's not his policy to fight. He migrates away. He leaves the scene of violence. He goes up north. In the first year after that, we have the Battle of Badr. The second year, we have Uhud. The fifth year, we have Khandaq. Khandaq, which means trench. True? But it is also called by another name. What is it called? Huh? The Battle of Ahzab. The Ahzab. And what does Ahzab mean? Groups or allies. Let's say allies. Such a large allied force had gathered in that year of non-Muslims wanting to attack the city of Medina, that had they been successful, that would have been the end of Medina and of the Muslims. So the Muslim faith would die then and there. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, practiced a defensive measure. he dug a trench on the northern pass towards Medina, knowing that this is the most likely route that the non-Muslim armies would take. And when the armies came there, they could not cross the trench. They waited it out for 3 weeks, bearing the elements of weather, and eventually they could not handle it anymore. The Allied forces disintegrated, and they left the scene, and the Muslims were known to have withstood that large Allied force. So now the Muslims had some position of relative strength, or at least some honor. The Prophet Muhammad then, peace be upon him, in the 6th year, set out to make the pilgrimage. A minor one. An Umrah, as we will say in the Arabic, right? So he set out to make the pilgrimage to Umrah, and when he went close up to Mecca, where he's to make the pilgrimage, because the target of the pilgrimage is to go to the sacred house which is there in Mecca. There he's prevented by the non-Muslims from entering Mecca. And he makes a peace agreement with them, that there will be peace for 10 years. He won't be able to enter this year, but he'll be able to come back the following year, at which time they'll clear out the town and give him free pass so that he will come in, make his pilgrimage, and go back without interacting with the locals. Why do they not want the Muslims to interact with the locals? Today we have a problem where we're thinking, okay, can Muslims integrate, and so on. There is a perception that Muslims don't want to interact with others. But there, the problem was that the others did not want the Muslims to interact with them. What was the problem? The others thought that if the Muslims interacted with them, with the locals, then the Muslims would influence the locals with their newfound faith. They didn't want this interaction. So the deal is, we're going to have peace for 10 years. You can't enter this year. You come back next year. We'll make the preparation for you. We'll clear the way so that you can come in peacefully, make your pilgrimage, and return. So the Prophet Muhammad agreed to that. The document was drawn up initially, reading that this is an agreement between Muhammad, the Messenger of God, and Suhail bin Amr, who represents the Quraysh people of Mecca. But Suhail bin Amr said, I can't accept that the document reads that way. We don't accept you as the Messenger of God. And had we accepted you as the Messenger of God, we wouldn't be having this agreement to begin with. So you have to cross out Messenger of God. Ali, the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who had been writing the document, couldn't bear to cross out such a formula, which for him was a deeply held faith. The Prophet Muhammad himself, peace be upon him, said, okay, show me where it is, and he crossed it out, and he wrote son of Abdullah, which was his known surname, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. The Muslims could not handle this. How do you have this one-sided sort of an agreement? Furthermore, it was stipulated that if any new Muslim were to be reclaimed by his people of Mecca, his family in Mecca, he would have to be returned. But if any of the if any of the Muslims were to come and join the Meccans, then they would not be returned. So you have, again, a one-sided kind of exchange. But the Prophet Muhammad agreed to all of these terms. Omar, who would eventually become the second caliph of Islam, actually protested, aren't you the messenger of God? And isn't Islam the truth? So why are you agreeing to all of these conditions? But the Prophet nevertheless calmed him down and agreed. The contract, the agreement was signed. On the return journey, a part of the Quran came to be revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. That is now the beginning of Surah 48. Which says, "Inna fatahna laka fatham mubina." We have given you a clear victory. So that wasn't a battle. It was a peace agreement. But this is called a victory in the Quran in Surah 48, verse number 1. The chapter itself is called Surah al-Fath, the chapter of the victory. And the commentators generally say that this is a reference to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Now, in what sense did this turn out to be a victory? It only lasted for 17 months until the other side broke the treaty. But the Muslims were able to observe that in the 17 months of peace following this covenant, more people embraced the religion of Islam than in the 17 years prior to that of all of the preaching of Islam. What was the difference? In peacetime, people listen to what you have to say, and if you have something reasonable to say, people will listen to it and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But in wartime, people don't have a chance to listen. The fight or flight mode kicks in. If they have power, they fight you. If they don't, they take flight from you. So in the previous 17 years, that was the situation. People don't listen. In the 17 months of peace, people were listening, and more people entered